How does the most devastating war in human history actually begin? Well, it's not with a single event, but with a chain reaction. It's like a series of dominoes, set up years, even decades before the first shots are ever fired. Today, we're going to trace that chain from a treaty that was supposed to bring peace to a war that engulfed the entire planet. Let's get into it.
You really can't overstate the scale of this thing. We're talking about entire cities turned to rubble, nations completely redrawn on the map, and, geopolitical events happening today that can still be traced all the way back to its outcome. So understanding how it all started isn't just a history lesson. It's absolutely essential for making sense of the world we're all living in right now.
So, what was that domino effect? Well, we can break it down into 4 key stages that all work together to light the fuse. We'll start with the so-called peace that honestly created more problems than it solved. Then we'll see how desperation in a country can fuel the rise of a dictator. From there, we'll follow his path of aggression. And finally, we'll watch as the entire world ignites into war. Okay, so our story doesn't start in 1939 with the invasion of Poland. It starts 20 years earlier, in 1919. World War I is finally over. The winners gather to sign the Treaty of Versailles. But this wasn't a treaty about reconciliation. For Germany, it was all about punishment. And this, right here, was the very first domino to fall. At the very core of this treaty was Article 231, what became known as the War Guilt Clause. Now, this wasn't just some legal fine print. It was designed to be a profound national humiliation. You have to remember, Britain and France were reeling from their own incredible losses. They needed someone to blame. And more importantly, they needed someone to foot the bill. And what a bill it was. The fine they slapped on Germany was, in today's money, about $270 billion. Let that sink in. This wasn't just a penalty. It was an economic death sentence. It was specifically designed to cripple the German state for generations to come. And yeah, this was not a short-term thing. The very first payment in 1921 sent the German economy into a complete tailspin, leading to this insane hyperinflation crisis. And just look at that final date, 2010. Germany was still paying off this debt almost 100 years later. It was a constant, grinding weight on the entire nation. And this right here, this is where the seeds of the next war were really planted. All of that economic desperation created the perfect breeding ground for extremism. You had a nation that felt humiliated, that was completely impoverished, and it became incredibly vulnerable to radical voices promising to make Germany great again. Let's look at just how bad things got on the ground. If you want to understand what hyperinflation actually means for regular people, this says it all. In just 1 year, the price of a single loaf of bread went from 160 marks to 200 billion marks. Money became worthless. People's life savings totally wiped out overnight. The economy didn't just collapse, it basically evaporated. And then, just when you think it can't possibly get any worse, the Great Depression hits the entire globe. It slams into Germany's already broken economy, and unemployment just skyrockets. By 1933, you have 6 million people out of a job. People were homeless. Kids were starving. The nation was in a state of absolute despair. And right into this chaos steps Adolf Hitler. He was a master manipulator, and he gave the German people a very simple, very powerful, and deeply hateful story. He told them their suffering wasn't their fault. No, it was the fault of these anti-national traitors inside the country, the Jews, the socialists. He took all their pain and humiliation and just weaponized it. And by 1933, this desperate nation made him its dictator. So once he's in power, Hitler starts to systematically just tear up the Treaty of Versailles. He makes one aggressive move after another, each one bolder than the last, basically testing the will of the international community, which for the most part just stood by and watched. I mean, every single one of these actions was a direct violation of that treaty. Rebuilding the German Air Force, totally forbidden. Signing the Anglo-German Naval Agreement. Britain basically just gave him permission to build a bigger navy. Then he annexes Austria, uniting the German-speaking peoples. And after that, he turns his eyes towards Czechoslovakia. Each move was a test, and each time, the world let him get away with it. This quote from the British Prime Minister, Neville Chamberlain, it just perfectly captures the thinking at the time. The policy was called appeasement. Everyone was so haunted by the memory of World War I, the idea was, hey, maybe if we just give Hitler what he wants, in this case, a German-speaking part of Czechoslovakia called the Sudetenland, maybe he'll be satisfied and we can avoid another terrible war. This was all made official at the Munich Agreement. But appeasement was a catastrophic failure. Hitler promised the world he had no more territorial demands.
And then, less than 6 months later, his army just rolled in and took over the rest of Czechoslovakia. It was suddenly crystal clear to everyone that Hitler's ambitions had no limits and that his promises meant absolutely nothing. So the invasion of Czechoslovakia completely shattered that policy of appeasement. Britain and France finally realized they had to draw a line in the sand, and that line was going to be for Poland. They issued one final ultimatum: an attack on Poland would mean war. Hitler ignored it. On September 1st, 1939, German troops stormed into Poland. The line had been crossed. Britain and France had no choice. 2 days later, they officially declared war on Germany. World War II had begun. But Germany wasn't fighting like the world had seen before. Hitler unleashed this revolutionary and absolutely terrifying new military strategy: Blitzkrieg, or lightning war. The whole idea was to avoid the slow, grinding trench warfare of World War I and instead just win with shocking, overwhelming speed. So here's how it worked. First, you have waves of fast-moving tanks, panzers, that just punch through the enemy lines, causing total chaos. They're immediately followed by dive bombers from the Air Force, the Luftwaffe, acting as a kind of flying artillery. And before the enemy can even figure out what's happening and regroup, they're completely surrounded and forced to surrender. Poland's more old-fashioned army just stood no chance.
The effectiveness of Blitzkrieg was horrifying. After Poland fell in just a few weeks, Hitler turned his attention west. In the spring of 1940, Denmark and Norway were conquered. Then, in May, he launched his all-out assault on France and its neighbors. An entire continent was falling, and it was falling at lightning speed.
In France, the German advance was so unbelievably fast that it trapped the main British and French armies against the sea at the port of Dunkirk. And in what really seemed like a miracle, a massive evacuation effort called Operation Dynamo, using everything from warships to little civilian fishing boats, managed to rescue nearly 350,000 soldiers. But while it saved the men, it was a devastating defeat. The Allies had to leave almost all of their heavy equipment behind, and just days later, France surrendered.
So let's just take stock of where we are. It's the summer of 1940. Hitler is the master of Europe. He's allied with Italy, and he's got a non-aggression pact with the Soviet Union, so his eastern front is secure. Only Great Britain remains defiant. The Nazi war machine seems absolutely unstoppable. From this vantage point, the war looks all but won for Germany, which leaves us with a critical question. How on earth could the Allies possibly fight back?